Welcome to the Real News Network in Baltimore. I'm Kim Brown. The NAACP filed a lawsuit in federal court on Monday against several North Carolina election boards to reinstate up to 4,500 voters who have been purged from voter registries. According to the suit, the voter registry purge is illegal under the Voting Registration Act, which states that voters can only be taken off the rolls if they submit a change of address or do not vote in at least 2 previous election cycles. That lawsuit comes at the same time that the Democratic Party is also filing several cases against the Republican Party for voter intimidation in violation of the Voting Rights Act. And joining us today from North Carolina to talk about these cases is Professor Irv Joyner, who teaches law at North Carolina Central University, and he is at the School of Law there, and he's also the legal counsel for the NAACP North Carolina chapter. Professor Joyner, we appreciate you speaking with us today. Thanks a lot.
Okay, appreciate this opportunity.
Well, Professor, let's get started with what happened in some counties in North Carolina. So why has the NAACP filed this case against a county election board?
Well, we've received persistent reports from 3 counties at that point that there was a systematic effort in place to purge African American voters from the voting rolls in those counties. And the device that they used to do that was sending postcards to the registered address of these voters, and the postcards were non-forwardable. And when those postcards came back, they were then presented to the boards of elections as evidence that those individuals no longer resided in that residence. And based on that, the Board of Elections in the counties were purging those individuals from the rolls. When we got that information, we sprung into action and challenged that at the county level. We challenged that at the state level, but were unsuccessful at both in causing them to back up from the positions that they had taken. So we ended up filing a suit in federal court on Monday morning, seeking some judicial intervention in the matter.
Was there some sort of commonality between these voters who had received these cards in the mail?
Yes, several commonalities. One was race and political party, majorly race, because for African Americans here in this state, the Democratic Party labels kind of follows them. In addition to that, all of these claims were brought by operatives of the Voter Integrity Project, which is a right-wing organization connected with the Republican Party that is supposed to be fighting for the honesty and integrity of the vote. But as we have seen it played out in the state, honesty and integrity of the vote means minimizing the number of African Americans who participate in the political franchise.
So, Professor Joyner, have you noticed an uptick in these types of tactics of trying to exclude certain demographics or certain party affiliations from the voter rolls in North Carolina in the wake of the election of President Barack Obama in 2008?
Well, we have seen that as a result of the election in 2008, that there has been an increased effort, more aggressive effort in North Carolina to challenge African American voters. We had in place prior to 2008 increased voting opportunities for all people, and early voting for 17 days, out of precinct voting, same-day registration, pre-registration of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. And these opportunities were used in large part by African Americans. So by the time election day rolled around, we had roughly 60% of African Americans who utilized one of these processes in order to vote. So when the Republicans went into office and the Shelby decision was decided in 2013, they then enacted laws that restricted early voting, cut out same-day registration, eliminated out-of-precinct voting, and also eliminated pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. So that was a part of their campaign to undermine the political participation of African Americans, and we went to court there, fought and won that case. So we are regularly engaged in efforts to fight back and resist their campaign to knock African Americans off of the polling books, or to otherwise frustrate and restrict the participation at the elections.
And Professor, you referenced the Shelby County versus Holder Supreme Court decision of 2013, in which the Supreme Court was able to successfully gut some measures of the Voting Rights Act, including, I believe it was Section 2, which affects pre-clearance, in which states that had a proven history of disenfranchising voters, specifically black voters, had to, at some point, come to the federal government, go to the Department of Justice if they wanted to make any changes to their election proceedings. And the Supreme Court case effectively said that that is no longer needed. And I wanted to get your opinion, sir, specifically about what Chief Justice John Roberts said in his opinion at the time, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that the reason that the Voting Rights Act was so important in 1965 was because there was a tremendous amount of racism and racial discrimination, and now America has taken extraordinary measures to wipe away a lot of that racist past. So a lot of the efforts put into the Voting Rights Act were no longer needed in 2013 and beyond, because racism is no longer such a systematic problem. This is according to Chief Justice Roberts. Your thoughts about that as we look and see a lot of the tactics that are being employed against African American voters during this cycle?
Well, it's clear to us here that he either omitted to look at the history in North Carolina, or just disregarded the history in North Carolina, because there's never been a period in North Carolina history where there were not efforts to discriminate against African Americans in the voting process. So to us here, that's a laughable proposition, but it also underscores this notion that this right-wing Republican efforts is designed to undermine and to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. And Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was a critical part of that process that allowed us to go to the Justice Department to resist many of the efforts that were designed to negatively impact African Americans, and we were successful at that. And in fact, most of the states in the South were effective at using Section 5 to beat back these efforts. But now that it's gone, now these states have more aggressively gone after those particular laws and opportunities that African Americans have to increase their participation in the political franchise. And we're very happy that we were very successful in what we were able to do in North Carolina. And in 2008, African Americans voted at a higher rate than whites in North Carolina, the first time in history. And in 2012, for President Obama's re-election, again, African Americans outvoted whites in that election, and we are on the way to outvoting them again in this election. So no matter what they throw at us, we have a resilient community that is fighting back, and we're fighting back in the streets, we're fighting back in the voting booth, and we're fighting back in the courts.
And Professor, how big a difference do you think that these tactics that are trying to discourage the vote, especially the African American vote in your state, do you think they will make an impact at the polls? And have you seen it so far during early voting? What's the turnout been like?
Well, the turnout of African Americans in this election is down somewhat from 2012 as of Wednesday. We don't have the statistics from Thursday and Friday, but based on information that I've received from people, there is a renewed effort to increase that turnout, and we're confident that by the end of the day on Saturday, African Americans will be showing up at the poll and showing out at the polls. Clearly, on November the 8th, there will be a significant turnout of African Americans. So we feel confident in the turnout of African Americans in this state.
Professor, I read an opinion piece today. It was published in NOLA.com, a New Orleans newspaper, not necessarily applicable to North Carolina, but sort of. And the premise of the op-ed was if the Republicans have to suppress the votes of Black Americans, then maybe they should find another line of work. What does it say that the only way, or I guess a proven way, that the GOP can be victorious, whether it's at the local level, state level, or when we're doing national races, is to try to restrict the voting rights and to impede democracy for a certain demographic of people? What do you have to say to that?
Well, it shows, at least to us here, that the Republican Party has just become a substitute for conservative right-wing races. One with a political party that offers absolutely no opportunity or efforts to improve the conditions of African Americans, and then that the only way that they can win is by restricting the votes of African Americans. And by now, we are well aware of these tactics, and the Republican Party will not change its stripes, and they're doing the same things that they have done since they've come into power, and many of them are disenfranchised or disenchanted former Democrats who were disgruntled with the fact that African Americans were becoming an active force in the Democratic Party. So we know that there is this kind of right-wing, conservative, racist tendency that has overtaken the Republican Party, and we stand ready to fight against that, because our very existence is dependent on our successfully fighting back against these trends.
And lastly, Professor, the Republican nominee for President, Donald Trump, he has openly called for his supporters to observe voting in, quote, certain areas, apparently implying majority Black neighborhoods. Talk to us about voter intimidation and whether or not you've received any reports of people in your area being intimidated at the polls when they have gone to exercise their right.
We have instructed our people around the state to make sure that they are watching the people that are watching them. And those people who are going out to videotape them, that we have people at the polls who are videotaping the actions that they are engaged in, because we want to show them that our community will not be intimidated, despite efforts to do so. So we're going to fight fire with fire where it is necessary for us to do so. We are in contact with the county boards of elections, and when complaints come to us about these efforts at intimidation, we are going to respond to them as we have in the past. And we've been, up to this point, pretty successful in resisting those efforts.
How are your members able to report these instances to you when they occur?
We have direct contact. 1-866 Our Vote is one way that they contact us. We have a team attorney office here in Durham, and members of the NAACP have a direct line to us there. And then we have operatives at every polling place. And when these complaints are raised, then they know to get names, addresses, statements, so that we can reduce those to affidavits if need be, and to go into court to seek to challenge and to resist those intimidation acts.
All right, we have been speaking with Irv Joyner. He is the legal counsel for the NAACP chapter in North Carolina. He also teaches law at North Carolina Central University School of Law. Professor Joyner, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching the Real News Network.